welcome back to another episode of Drake's Dungeon. It is March already. Spring is starting to come, and here in Portland, I live in Portland, Oregon, where the rest of the team lives in Vancouver, Canada. We both experience springtime by the coming of rain. So both here in Victoria, Canada, and in Portland, Oregon, we have been receiving our springtime rain, as we love to get. So that's how we know that it is time. Torrential downfall, but we've been loving it. I love it. Hopefully, however you guys experience the end of winter and the beginning of spring is wonderful. But spring means change, and change is a-coming this spring in War Commander. And to talk about it, we have joining us again this month our lead designer, Young Russell. Welcome back, Young Russell.
Having me again. I'm glad to have passed the first time.
yes, you did not screw up, so we decided to bring you back. And joining us again, it's been over a year. Where have you been? Product designer, Kuriel.
Hey, how's it going? Been a while.
It has been a while. I wonder what happened. It's like we just didn't do one of these for like a year or so. It's kind of strange.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Well, I'm glad that you're both back again with you. And yes, a lot of changes are coming. I mentioned some of these changes in the CM diary, the March preview post that I posted last week to the community, that we have some major stuff. So the first thing that's going to be happening that I'm just going to jump right into because there's a lot to talk about with this episode. So starting on March 10th, so just like a week or so from when this episode is going to be going up in the community, we are retiring token bases from the game, and faction bases are now moving on to being the series bases exclusively. And on top of that, we're coming out with some new challenge bases. So that's a lot that's going on. So why all the changes? Let's just go straight into that. Why all the changes?
Well, our challenge bases, along with some of the other bases that we'll also be revamping, haven't been updated for quite some time. Right now, it takes players quite a while to get the rewards they want. They don't have much of a challenge in the current challenge bases, and it's really hard to find them on the world map a lot of time for players. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making them a bit more difficult, so it's a little bit more of a challenge, consolidating some of those bases so that there's a few less bases, but the rewards are going to be much, much higher, so that if players want to get the rewards they need, they can just go onto the world map and more quickly do that. And it'll also help with the world map clutter, which we know is an issue. Sometimes it's really hard for players to find the specific bases they want. So later down the line, we might obviously add some stuff to the stores, and we're going to be going through and doing a lot of the generic reward bases in the future to try and make them more up to date and make it a bit more accessible for players to get the stuff they need.
Yeah, and it's been about 2 years really since we've released a unit that's used tokens as well. So having things like the token bases, it's been just a really long time since those have been just relevant in general.
Yeah, there hasn't been many unit upgrades or acquisition based on tokens recently, other than obviously the Blood Thorium. We still use tokens for our Blood Thorium units, which are paid with the Blood Thorium payouts.
And the hero bases, which the hero token bases will still stay on the map. Just to clarify that as well, that the hero token bases are not going anywhere.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, and this is not just the end too. Like we're coming up with these new challenge bases. This revamp is not just going to be challenge bases only. Like it's just challenge bases for now, but we are looking into the future of revamping other bases that are on the map and potentially doing a similar treatment to other types of bases and things like that players do hit.
Yeah, that is correct. And Young Russell can maybe touch on a little bit of that if he wants right now.
So, like had been mentioned before, a lot of the bases on the world map have been there for a very long time. And as we know with War Commander, things change quite quickly. And so they are mostly out of date for a lot of them. And so we're in the process, whether it be a long or short process, I'm not sure, of going through and identifying some of the more egregious issues on the world map and trying to rectify those first. We are going to be at some point, hopefully maybe not revamping everything, but at least taking a look at everything and seeing where the issues are and where we can have some improvements with so players have a better experience using the world map.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, so that basically covers a lot of the changes that are going to be happening just with the world map in March. But we have even a bigger thing that's going to be happening in March, which is stat compression, which that can be a can of worms to really jump into. And this is going to be probably a topic that we're going to be sitting on for a little bit on the conversation. But first off, I want to get into Kuriel here. What exactly is stat compression? Like, what does this mean for players?
So what it means for players is right now we're getting into numbers that for some players are really hard to decipher. Like we've been in like hundreds of millions, tens of millions, even a million is quite a large number. So what we're doing is we're compressing that down so that players in game will see numbers that'll probably be on more recent units like 10,000 or 100,000. So they're more easily readable and decipherable, and we don't have certain technical limitations that we're currently running into, which a lot of the time we want to be creating new stuff. We don't want to be fixing technical limitations with our time. So, once we get this out of the way, it'll actually give us some more room to help creating content for the game. So we're going to see it come back, but also what a follow-up question might be is like, what about my really older units? Like, what about my riflemen? What about my Gen 1 units?
Hey, it's my job to do the follow-up questions, Kuriel. What about my old units, like my riflemen and things like that?
Well, for those units, we're going to stop around like Gen 3-ish power, somewhere around there. We haven't completely decided, but everything will be kind of bumped up to a reasonable level around that. So a lot of units may become, usable in certain situations that were currently not really usable because of just the massive power creep that's happened over about 10 years of the game, which, to be fair to people, wasn't probably what had been intended 10 years ago when they buffed units, maybe by 5x or 10x. Well, if you do that, 100 times over or whatever, it becomes a really big issue, which we're seeing now.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from needing to do something like stat compression is kind of like a testament to how long this game has just been around. Like, games in our market, they'll be lucky if they stick around for 2, maybe 3 years. This game's been around for 10 years. So the fact that we're getting to this point where we have to start compressing down these numbers because we never intended platoons to be able to hold billions of hit points, billions of health, and it's causing problems in the game is kind of like hey, that's a cool problem to have. Like it's like a Y2K problem type of thing for War Commander to have. And for those that are kind of curious about what type of technical issues that he's talking about, they first started popping up really in the game for players when we had the last holdout, and players, for instance, would take the Morning Star and add in like 10 crucibles and would get errors saying that they couldn't deploy that platoon. And that's because the platoon health value was so high that it basically exceeded the capacity of what was hard-coded into the game 10 years ago of what a platoon capacity could be. Because 10 years ago, they never dreamed that we would have, platoons with 2 billion plus health or whatever. So, that's why we really need to do this breakdown of this compression of the health and make it so we can keep this going for many, many more years to go in the future as we develop more advanced weaponry and things like that. Wow, I had my own little rant with this as well. But Russell, how is this going to affect players attacking enemy targets as well? Because if you compress down all of the players' stuff, what does that mean for all the things that they're going to be attacking?
Well, the things that are going to be attacking the rogue faction templates are going to be way harder. No, we're going to be compressing rogue faction units as well, so don't worry about that. In fact, anything that has a health value is going to be compressed. Anything that has a damage number dealt is going to be compressed. So health and damage across the board for everything we can find is going to be reduced at a as much of a similar rate as we can. The goal, of course, would be to have there be no difference whatsoever to players. But like Kuriel had mentioned, some of our older units aren't going to be as compressed as some of our newer units, and so there will be a bit of a leveling of the playing field a little bit. So yeah, you might see some old, turrets be a little bit more usable than before, but the overall difference should be negligible.
Yeah, so you might get some use out of your special forces and some of your legacy units again, but you wouldn't expect that those are still going to be viable units to use in PvP or anything like that.
Yeah, you can still bring them with you and use them as cannon fodder if you want to, more so than you could before. But I wouldn't try to tackle a full base with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, on top of all the changes that are happening in March, we also have our first unit in the Tungsten line coming up. So, Russell, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Pathfinder and why the tungsten weapons are going to be important over this next arc?
Of course. So, the Pathfinder is the new air unit for the survivors. It's a fixed wing aircraft, so it'll continuously fly over the battlefield, shooting burst weapons down. By default, it'll hit ground only, but once you upgrade it to level 20, you're going to get a AA machine gun that does sustained damage.
Nice.
So it'll be able to hold its own against hopefully anything that we can throw at you. Obviously, with it being the new weapon type, it's going to be the best unit to use against Mayhem's composite armor. Now, I know we have some new Mayhem units, and they're looking pretty cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, they look really
cool. So I'm very excited to have this faction. It's a big difference in terms of visuals from Iron Strike, and they're a lot of fun to play against so far. So, the Pathfinder is definitely the one to pick up to take into these Mayhem bases.
And I'll be dropping the podcast at the same time that I drop the event briefing. So as we're talking about this, head on over to the event briefing so you can see the art for the new Mayhem units. Really nice, like Mad Max kind of Road Warrior feel to these units. I love the look of them. Really cool stuff. Kuriel, we're going to be having a major refresh to the legendary Mega Tank coming up for Warpath this month as well. Again, so much new stuff coming up in March, like, stat compression, world map changes, new Pathfinder unit, and we're revamping the Mega Tank. So can you tell us a little bit about what's behind bringing this unit back to the front lines? Because this is one of the first legendary units, as I recall. It's a pretty old one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the very, very early units. It's in the first, I think, 200 units that were ever created in War Commander. Like you've seen with the most recent PvP units, the Legendary Rifleman and Stinger, we're looking to kind of create an ecosystem in PvP, which we've been doing for months backwards, of making PvP units the best units to have. So creating something like the Legendary Rifleman and Stinger created like a really good baseline basic unit for players to have that really shows them that, PvP units are great for PvP, right? They aren't, just some units that you don't need to purchase that you can just skip and go through. We want them to be really good for PvP, so the serious PvPers want to bring them up. So with the Mega Tank, it's another, somewhat more basic design in a tank, but we want to create it is a really viable option in the PvP meta. So creating some more basic units and filling that PvP ecosystem up a bit more is kind of like our overall design for the last, I'd say, half a year in PvP. We've been trying to really push that needle towards, PvP units being a really good investment for players.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, it's the simplicity of its design is what I think, honestly, makes it so classic and why I think it's going to be such a great addition to the updated legendary units. Funny enough, I've known for months now that we have had plans to update the legendary mega tank, but I kid you not, over the last couple weeks, probably received over a dozen or so requests from players for an upgrade to the mega tank. So even before players had really started, like after we upgraded the rifleman and the stinger, I started getting these requests like, "Hey, can you guys do the mega tank next?" And already knowing that we were going to be doing the mega tank, so I think that this is going to be another one like the rifleman and the mega tank, or in the stinger, that players are really going to get pretty excited for. So this is going to be really good.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it too. And I mean, we've had this on the books for, I think, 7 months now when you talk about speaking it a while back.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So is there anything else you guys would like to add about, I mean, there's a plenty coming up in March, but is there anything else you guys would like to add or maybe tease that we don't necessarily want to give away everything that's happening?
No, I think I'm pretty good, at least for my stuff I want to talk about. I know there's a lot more to talk about stat compression and where PvP is going and all these base changes. So I think that's about it for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously lots of changes happening to War Commander, and I don't want to give anything away, so we'll see what's in the stars for us.
Okay. Again, they're probably going with the conspiracy theories there. What's in the stars? Are we introducing aliens next? Is that what's going on, Young Russell? Are aliens coming into the game? Actually, we've already had aliens. Actually, we had the UFOs that have landed for the 4th of July. Little bases that we've had. We've had those UFOs that have landed. So we've already had aliens.
That's right. And in
Those
April,
the
we're combining.
Independence Day base, right, Young Russell?
Yeah.
All right,
in April, we're combining Vega Conflict and War Commander into one game. So
Vega Commander, War Conflict.
War Conflict.
Well, I did promise, starting with this month's episode, that we were going to start taking player questions. And so in the monthly surveys that appear above the game, the last question is the chance for players to submit questions. We had, I kid you not, hundreds of questions. So I went through and I basically created kind of like an amalgamation of some questions to kind of like go, okay, there's a lot of similar questions here about a couple different things. So I'm going to combine a couple of them so we can get a couple questions answered in one kind of question. So we're going to get 2 questions for this episode. The first question is, currently the level cap is 53. Are there any plans on increasing the level cap or changing the way levels work?
Okay, so this is a complex question. Just prefacing with this, nothing is final. This is something we've talked about for a while. There's a few ideas on basically, like, I'm level 53 or I'm level 50. What does that mean and why am I level 50? So creating some more information about what gives level and possibly reworking that would be one thing that we've talked about. Another thing would be a lot of players may get hit by a low level player, which may have a lot of PvP meta units. They may have a really well designed base, but they may not be a high level. So also we have on the books a discussion about, like, is there a player level for PvE and is there a player level for PvP? So that's something we would want to revisit, and it would probably be a lot of work in trying to figure out how that would look for a player and for a player experience to identify really who's a really strong high level PvPer and how do they get there, and who's a really strong PvEer and how did they get there.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, player level is really just shows how much resources you've accumulated over the time that you've been playing the game. It's not an actual representation of how powerful you are as a player. A newer player that's maybe been playing for 5 or 6 months, who's been able to get a lot of the more recent units that are offered in the events, or just been able to consistently play, could feasibly beat a high level base if they've really worked on getting a lot of the newer content. So power level of a person in the game is very different from what their base level is. So have there been talks on changing? We talk about it a lot. We talk about it. We have a lot of ideas that we floated around. So yes, the discussion is out there, but there are no current plans. As for changing the current level cap, that's another thing that I don't think there's any current plans as well. So right now, I think it's at 53, which is incredibly hard to get to. By the way, you have to really, really work to get to 53. But right now it's set to 53, but there are no current plans on making it go any higher. Yeah.
If we revisited it, it would be something that we'd also look at. Like if we get deeper into how we think of these systems to work, we would want to give players something, higher to reach for rather than 53 when and if we were to do something like that. So that would definitely be something that is on the table for players.
Mm-hmm. And this next question is actually kind of a bug report that I've seen a lot, so I kind of wanted to bring this one up and get it addressed. But sound doesn't work on my account. Will this be fixed?
Yes. I will say yes. It will be fixed. The question is when. Obviously, sound was one of the big things that stopped working or worked differently after we did the HTML5 conversion. And we've been, I would say, more focused on the gameplay and repercussions of that recently and fixing a lot of those issues. And so now that we've addressed most of those, sound is obviously definitely on our radar, and it has been on our radar for the entire time it hasn't been working. We've addressed the probable cause of it. It'll just be a matter of finding the time to have someone go in and find a new solution or new workaround, because it'll probably be needed to not remade from the ground up, but re-implemented in a new way. So there's no time frame for it. I don't want to give you a time frame and then have it not work by then, but it is something that is on our plates and on our radar. So
yeah, engineers are definitely aware of it. It is one of those issues that's they definitely want to get it fixed. Like, we know what's causing it, but it takes a lot of time to actually get in there and fix what's causing the problem. And sadly, every single time something comes up that is going to be we think we're going to get time to fix it, then this stat compression issue is coming up. And that's going to be more important, because without this stat compression issue, we're not going to be able to create new units and things like that going forward. So bigger things have sadly kept coming up that have kind of taken a bit more importance, but it is still on the list of things that they really want to get done. So it's not something that has been ignored. It's just sadly a couple more important, bigger issues have kind of taken place ahead of time. But hopefully it will be worked on soon. We just don't have an exact estimate on when it will happen, unfortunately. So yeah, those are the questions. Keep submitting questions. There's a survey currently live right now about the game. When this episode goes live, the survey will be up. So if you have any other questions, please go ahead and submit those there. Well, Kuriel, Young Russell, thank you so much for joining this episode and talking about some of these changes. I'm sure that these things that we've discussed will be bringing up even more questions in the community. So I'll probably have more questions for you that I will then try to relay back to the community for the answers on. So you'll probably be hearing more from me over the next few days. But thank you so much, though, for taking the time and just having this discussion and cluing everybody in on what's going to be going on over this next month, because there's a lot of great stuff, and it's all stuff for the betterment of the game, too. So I think that's the most exciting part of it, is keeping the map, cleaning up the map so we can get fresher content out there, making it easier for people to get what they want, stat compression. This is all a lot of really exciting stuff. So thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you again to all the people that sent in their questions. I know I got hundreds of questions asking for my personal phone number. You can stop doing that now. But again, thank you.
Yeah, mostly because I'm tired of giving it out. So, yeah, I can only copy and paste so much. But yeah, we will be back next month with another episode of Drake's Dungeon. So until then, thank you so much for playing War Commander. Bye.
Previously on War Commander. In Operation Cast the Die, Greg and Jasma banded together to uncover the truth behind their real or digital circumstance. Coming up in Operation Speak Mayhem and Enter, Greg and Jasma have made their way out of their simulation, only to stumble right into the return of mayhem. Can our protagonists hope to survive? Operation Speak Mayhem and Enter runs from March 3rd to March 9th, 2022.